Hello, I'm Brad. Today I'm going to talk about the enemy of God. And a lot of people are curious about this enemy. They think they know what the enemy is, but they really don't know. They don't understand it. Today you'll hear Christians accusing the Muslims of being the enemy, or people in prison. They're the enemy. There's some enemy in Congress, that are trying to deceive others. There's enemies across the street, they're doing drugs. There's enemies everywhere. Now what about you, who points the finger at other people and breaks the commandment to not bear false witness against thy neighbor? Huh? You're breaking the law. Aren't you the enemy too? Because the law and the commandments were against the enemy. That's what separates the enemy from the truth of God. So, if you are accusing others of being enemy, then you better not be under the law and commandments of God. And I'll get to the real enemy, okay? But what you don't understand is that serpent that deceived Eve in the garden was not a snake. It was her flesh. God created everything in His image, which is thoughts. So man was created, the first man was created in his thoughts. But his first creation was light energy. And the light energy was used to create everything else. But the first man was created as thoughts in His image. And then He formed a flesh out of the dust of the earth for this man that He created. And the breath of air that He put in his nostrils, that was those thoughts that He put into that man's brain, that the brain of the flesh, to get that body to get going, to move. Because the thoughts are the life of God. That's the tree of life. That's the book of life. That's the creation. So that's what was blown into Adam's nostrils and became a living being. So he's living in heaven, at the same time living on earth. Now it said Lucifer was cast to the earth. That's the flesh of man. It's a symbolic name for the flesh of man. The serpent was the flesh of man. Satan is the flesh of man. The devil, the demons, the dead, the wicked, the thief, the murderer, the idolater, the adulterer. All these different names are for the flesh of man. That's the enemy of God. Now, why would God form the flesh that go against Him? Because this age was only designed to reveal His knowledge through His people. And His people are the light energy that He created. Yes, they were for light energy was used to create everything else, but the light energy had its own bodies. We call that the Word, or the light. They called it the light. They didn't have the name energy back then. They just used the light and the Word, because the light was needed to speak the Word. That was the energy that took God's thoughts and plans, because God planned everything before He created. So that's what takes all those plans and thoughts and puts them into action. The light energy was used to make all the atoms for all the worlds, the physical worlds that we see, and all the bodies that are formed for us to experience our thoughts. So this enemy, this flesh of ours, was made with genetic sin traits in our DNA. We have corrupted DNA, and it can only be changed by God, but only in His people of the Word. So the prophets, Jesus, and the saints were the Word. We were the bodies that the Word uses to reveal this knowledge of God. So, but we were all made sinners too, sinful flesh, except Jesus. He was the only one that was conceived without sin, because God changed the DNA in His parents' seed, and that way He could be conceived sinless. So as soon as He was born, God could use Him, use His body. He was totally obedient to God at all times. He didn't reject, His flesh didn't reject God. It didn't hate the Word. So they were together the whole time, ever since he was a kid. So God was able to teach him a lot of things before he started preaching the gospel. So he had a lot of knowledge in him, a lot more than most of the rest of us. Maybe not Paul and John. There's a few of them that lived a long time that got a lot of knowledge. So probably more so than even Jesus. But they you know, that's how God worked through us. So the Word has many bodies on earth, but just the light energy is one unit. It's one God. It's the light and God and the thoughts are one, needed for everything. Nothing would exist without them. But the flesh now was in total rejection of God. All through the 6,000 years of man, they've been totally rejecting each other. So the law and commandments were to show that they were condemned. The flesh is condemned to death. The penalty of sin is death. So once the flesh dies, then the penalty has been paid. So that person, the created thoughts for that person, remains in God, still alive. Can't go anywhere. There's thoughts can't move around and go everywhere. They're just all in God, and God exists everywhere. So you can't define, each person like we think in the spirit world, in God's spirit, I should say, not the spirit world, because there's only one spirit. There's only God, one Spirit of God, and everything exists in Him. So, but the material world we see is needed for us to experience life. So we have something to see and something to talk, to look at each other and talk and walk and see and smell and hear. That enhances our life. I mean, if we just exist as thoughts, nothing happens. We can't experience anything. So we need to have a physical body to experience our life. But now these enemies of ours, the flesh of this age, just in this age only. That's why we're limited. That's why it's a limited age. That's why we have a limited time on our flesh. And so we will be dying. We all die in the flesh. Now there are Christians that are trying to save themselves. They think they're going to get zapped up to heaven No, there's nothing like that. You're going to die. You're going to die like everybody else. We're all sinners. None of our bodies are good, except Jesus Christ and the saints who came after him. Now the saints were the only ones who had the Word in them that would become obedient to the Word. The prophets couldn't become totally obedient to the Word and become sinless because they came before the flesh sacrifice of Jesus. So they died under the law and commandments. The saints came afterwards. God was able to change their DNA and get them totally obedient to Him, so that He could reveal His knowledge through them and use it for the next age. And that's the purpose for this age, was this knowledge. It was very, very important, because in the next age, when we wake up in new bodies, those of us in the Word, we won't have any vocabulary or language to speak with. So we're going to be kind of freaked out. Won't be able, nothing. But this knowledge will help us put together a vocabulary and a language, so that God can start revealing more knowledge to us as we speak to each other. Because that's how He gives us knowledge, as we speak to each other. We need a language in order for God to communicate to us. He communicates to us with the truth. We communicate to each other with words, formed words. But in the next age, everybody will understand this new language, because God will free them. They won't have these genetic sin traits in their DNA to confuse their thoughts. So they'll be able to understand the language, the truth. So they'll learn about God and everything that exists in the next age. But this age, the flesh is the enemy of God. And we can't change any of that. That's nothing of what we do. Now, all religions of man are just part of the deception that God planned to keep us all deceived. And so there's nothing to, whatever religious people say has nothing to do with God. They're just using their own interpretations from their deceived thoughts, and this is, they come up with all kinds of weird ideas. That's why there's almost 40,000 denominations of Christianity today, because they're totally confused. And but all that's going to go away when we die. I hope. No, that's what God says in the scriptures, that the memories are going to be wiped out, and when we get our new bodies, we'll have the new language, and never again will we ever be confused and be in a world like we are today. The truth is, we're not going to have people working for other people. There won't be any business. Our work will consist of picking berries off the trees, fruits, and whatever exists hanging on the vines and trees that God is going to give us. We don't have to cultivate crops in order to eat. We won't have clothes. We won't be wearing clothes, because we won't have the sin of lust. So we won't be deceived by our nakedness. We won't have money, because we won't have greed. Won't be any greed in our hearts, in our DNA. So we don't need money. Everybody will live alike. We'll have different lives and stuff, but it's not going to be. We're not going to be deceived by a world like we're living in today. If you go back in the 1850s, 1800s, 1850s, when people started to come across to the United States from Europe, and they came, all they had was an animal or two, and with a wagon, and they were looking for their claim of land. Now, there's nothing there. I mean, they didn't have what we have here in the cities. They were just out in the nature. They had to do everything for themselves. They had to work hard just to get food. So every day they were thinking about where are they going to get the food. Well, we don't have that worry in the next life, in paradise. No, we just will just live. We're just going to live the way God wants us to live, and it's going to be peaceful, a very peaceful life, and full of joy, because God will be in our hearts constantly. We'll constantly be in worship of God. So maybe some of you aren't interested in that kind of life, but I sure am. Some of the stuff I've gone through, I'm ready for it. But so there won't be any more enemies in paradise, and we'll be free from all fear. And that's another thing. The enemies caused a lot of fear. Our flesh caused a tremendous amount of fear. You know, there's some people think there's boogeymen coming after them at nights and things like this. It's your own flesh doing that. There's nothing there. It's just your own flesh is causing you to have these dreams and visions and crazy thoughts. So you're the enemy. Your own flesh is the enemy. And I don't have those fears anymore. My flesh is gone of the world. It still has to exist in the world, but I have no passions for the world. None whatsoever. Even my friends and family, my wife, kids, they're not interesting to me anymore. Even I get along with them fine, but that's not what I desire. I desire God constantly. That's because I am God in the flesh. I'm the Word. I was created to speak for God. And so I can say, I am God in the flesh. I'm speaking for Him. It's confusing, I know. Believe me, it's confusing to me. It took me almost 2 years to say that. To say I was God in the flesh. Because of the flesh, because of the memory. The memory's always sitting there. Nah, you're not. You're not that. You're not God. You know, you can't be. And I know that's false. You know, I know that memory is no good. And so I live in the Spirit. Yes, I'm God in the flesh. And we're not. It's not the flesh itself, basically, because we exist within the atoms and outside the atoms. So it's not the mass that you see that's God. It's the God you can't see that's speaking. And well, I'm sure the enemy is telling you all kinds of things right now. So I'll just leave it at this. And I think you got enough information to know that you're sleeping with the enemy every night. And but don't worry about it, because after you die, you'll never sleep with the enemy again. I guarantee it. God bless you. See you later.